Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today we are going to talk about frontal bone. And here at the side you can see the diagrammatic representation of skull showing highlighted area, that is the frontal bone. So let's start our topic with introduction. Frontal bone is a large singular bone at the front of skull, as you can see here in the diagram. It forms the forehead, part of cranial roof and superior walls of orbit. It also participates in formation of anterior cranial fossa housing the frontal lobes of the brain. Now let's talk about anatomical regions of frontal bone. It has two regions, squamous part that is called as vertical portion and orbital part that is called the horizontal portion, and it also has another part that is called as nasal part. So let's talk about these parts one by one. First we have a squamous part of frontal bone or vertical portion of frontal bone. It forms the forehead. It is marked by two smooth elevations called frontal eminence that are more prominent in children. They include the glabella, that is a smooth, slightly depressed area between the eyebrows. It contains a supraorbital margin with supraorbital foramen or notch through which nerves and vessels pass to the forehead. Next part of frontal bone we have is orbital part, that is also called the horizontal portion of frontal bone. It forms the roof of orbit. They divide into orbital plates separated by gap called the ethmoidal notch. The notch accommodates the ethmoid bone and contains small pits for ethmoidal ear cells. Next anatomical region we have is nasal part. It projects downward between the eyebrows. It articulates with the nasal bone, maxilla, and nasal cartilage. It contains the nasal spine which contributes to the nasal septum. Now let's talk about frontal sinuses that are present in the frontal bone. They are located just behind the superciliary arches and they are air-filled cavities lined with mucosa. They are present by age of 6 and grow through adolescence. Their function is to lighten the skull, humidify air, and enhance voice resonance. They open into the middle meatus of nasal cavity through the frontonasal duct. Now let's talk about articulation of frontal bone. The frontal bone articulates with 12 bones. They are cranial bones, in which we have is two parietal bone, one sphenoid bone and one ethmoid bone. And then it articulates with the facial bone, in which we have is two nasal bone, two maxilla, two lacrimal and two zygomatic bone. The coronal suture marks articulation with the parietal bone. Now let's talk about surface landmarks and attachments. It has superciliary arches that are prominent ridges above the orbits. Then it has temporal lines that are arched ridges that mark the attachment of temporalis muscle. Then it has frontal crest that is a midline ridge on the internal surface for attachment of pallex cerebri. Now let's talk about development and ossification of frontal bone. Frontal bone develops from two ossification centers in the embryo, initially separated by metopic suture, which usually fuse by age 8. In some adults, the metopic suture persists partially or fully, known as metopism. And now let's talk about clinical significance of frontal bone. First is frontal sinusitis. It is inflammation of frontal sinuses that can cause headache and facial pain. Next clinical significance is fracture. That is, trauma to the frontal bone may lead to orbital roof fracture or damage to the frontal lobe. Next is surgical access. As neurosurgeons sometimes access the brain through the frontal lobe through procedures like craniotomy. Now let's talk about conclusion of this lecture video. From shaping the human face to housing the frontal lobes and sinuses, frontal bone is as functionally vital as it's structurally prominent. Understanding the anatomy is key in medicine, dentistry, neurology, and forensic sciences. And this was all about frontal bone. Hopefully you liked the video. If you do, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. Thank you for watching.